Well, good morning, everybody. It is 10 o'clock a.m., and I would like to call this virtual meeting of the Maryland Higher Education Commission to order. The first item on our agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from our previous meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Is there a second?
A second.
Thanks, Commissioner Thompson. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition or abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. The minutes are unanimously approved. I just wanted to say that many of us had the opportunity to have an in-person workshop last week led by the MHEC senior staff at the College Bound offices in Baltimore. It was, from my perspective as a commissioner, incredibly valuable and insightful. And I just wanted to. Good morning, Commissioner Burnham. How are you? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent.
Good morning.
Good morning. We just approved the minutes and I was just diving into my brief opening comments before turning it over to the interim secretary. And I was just remarking on how helpful I thought our in-person workshop was last week, led by interim secretary Kiros Lavanis and her team. So I wanted to just say thank you on behalf of all the commissioners who were able to make it. I know a lot of time and energy went into the preparation, and I think we as a commission got a lot out of it. So thank you, interim secretary Kiros Lavanis. And with that, I will turn it over to the interim secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, buenos dias, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and everyone tuning in today. I am joining you virtually this morning from New Orleans, where I am participating in the National Governors Association Roundtable on Degree Apprenticeships. As many of you know, Governor Moore is currently the Vice Chair of the NGA, and he will step into the role of Chair later this summer. His leadership on this national stage elevates the exact kind of innovative higher education vision we are actively building in Maryland. Being in these national conversations reinforces that our state is uniquely positioned to lead, serving in many ways as a microcosm of the United States. At a time when the value of higher education is being challenged across the country, we have a profound responsibility to demonstrate its power to drive broader societal change. That is why the 2026-2030 Maryland State Plan for Higher Education is anchored in a clear theory of change. It is driven by the fundamental truth that while talent is equitably distributed, this state plan exists to ensure that opportunity is too. We make that opportunity real by embracing real education beyond high school in all its forms. Whether a student's next step is on-the-job training, entering the military, committing to public service, earning a short-term credential at a private career school, or pursuing a degree pathway at a community college or university, our system must validate and support their journey. By providing learners with these flexible, affordable choices, we help them build family-sustaining careers, a private benefit that ultimately aggregates into a massive public return on investment. When our campuses act as regional and state anchors, they retain local talent, broaden our tax base, attract major employers, and help build resilient communities that can adapt to economic shifts. Of course, advancing a vision of this magnitude cannot be done in a vacuum. It requires the power of true partnership. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Vice Chair Agu and the State Plan Steering Committee and Working Group members for their partnership. It was absolutely critical to have such diverse multi-sector perspectives in the development of this iteration of our state plan. Shared ownership across post-secondary education, our business and industry partners, philanthropy, community-based organizations is essential if we're going to realize sustained generational change for our learners and the state. Building on that spirit of partnership, I also want to thank our commissioners for the immense time and energy you gave at last week's commission workshop. The agency and the state of Maryland are incredibly lucky to have such dedicated public servants guiding our post-secondary education ecosystem. We look forward to bringing the state plan before the commission for final adoption at our June meeting. Today's commission agenda puts that theory directly into practice. We will first hear an update on the workforce Pell policy, which speaks directly to our goal of expanding flexible credentialing and maximizing student choice. We will then ask the Commission to vote on the adoption of Conroy and Cryer guidelines, honoring those who commit to military and public service. We will also ask the Commission to accept our enrollment projections, which are a foundational requirement to accurately inform and guide our state's capital planning. Finally, we will cover updates on our legislative reports to ensure that we remain transparent and accountable. As you can see, we have a highly impactful and focused agenda ahead of us. Thank you again to the Commission for your partnership. Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Interim Secretary Kiros Lavanis. And I just wanted to echo your thanks to you and to Vice Chair Agu and to everyone involved in the state plan. It's very close to completion, and I think it's going to be an excellent final product. And thank you to so many people for putting so much time and thought into it. Our next agenda item is the update on the workforce Pell policy. And for this, I will turn the meeting over to Justin Nally, the Manager of Policy and Strategic Initiatives from the Governor's Workforce Development Board, to walk us through this. Justin?
Hi, good morning, Madam Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. Great to be here again this morning. Again, I'm Justin Nally, Manager of Policy and Strategic Initiatives with the Governor's Workforce Development Board. I want to first extend my deep appreciation to the Secretary and the Maryland Higher Education Commission staff who have been outstanding partners throughout this Workforce Pell process. We've made significant progress over the past several months. At the end of April, Maryland released the draft Workforce Pell Determination Policy for public comment. We are currently reviewing and incorporating that feedback to ensure the final policy is both clear and comprehensive. There are three key areas we anticipate providing additional clarification in the final policy. First, we want to further emphasize the role of registered apprenticeships. Programs that serve as the related instruction component of a registered apprenticeship program automatically meet eligibility requirements. Senate Bill 509, the Workforce Pell Grant Program Implementation Bill, expanded this requirement during session to include on-the-job training components, and we want to ensure that alignment is reflected clearly in the policy. Second, we plan to provide additional clarity regarding incarcerated learners. We received thoughtful and constructive feedback on how states should approach and support this population, and we intend to address these considerations in the final guidance. Thirdly, we want to clarify how local workforce areas can propose programs tied to industries or occupations that may not fully align with the statewide list. We also intend to build in flexibility around aligning occupation codes and program codes to better reflect regional workforce needs. The final final federal regulations were released on May 18th, and there are two notable updates from those regulations. First, the final rules retain the existing 25% cap of partnerships of Title IV institutions with non-eligible providers. However, there's an important exception for registered apprenticeship programs. They may now provide up to 49% of related technical instruction through non-eligible providers. Secondly, Workforce Pell programs must continue to meet the 70% placement threshold for eligibility. Under the final rule, students who continue their education after completing a Workforce Pell supported program will still count towards the job placement metric. However, those students will be excluded from the value added metric that is used to determine whether median earnings exceed program cost. Over the next month, we will align Maryland's final policy with the federal regulations so that we are prepared for a July 1st implementation date and we can begin reviewing programs. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nally. Any questions from the commission? Vice Chair Agu.
Mr. Nally, first of all, thank you so much for the update, and honestly, please pass along our thanks to the entire Workforce Development Board. I know it's been a lot of work, particularly with a mercurial partner. Let me say it like that. And so but just thank you all for your effort. I have one question, and it also may go to the interim secretary as well, which is, I know right now the amount of programs that are eligible for Workforce Pell in Maryland is frankly very small. That's not unusual in many states. I know that's the case. Can we talk about just the plan to make more programs eligible? So again, as students who seek to use the benefit, they have more and more choices. Can we just talk about how we begin to expand the list? And we know that won't be tomorrow, but what's kind of our plan to think and do that over time?
Yeah, so I'll begin. So we want to make sure that we do have robust technical assistance for programs that may be meeting that threshold. So as programs apply for the Workforce Pell eligibility, which will be through the eligible training provider list under WIOA, we want to make sure that programs, because it's a high rate, 70% placement, 70% job completion, and 70% placement rate. We want to make sure we get those programs up that may be below that threshold. So I think a robust coordination between agencies here, the GWIB, Labor, and the Maryland Higher Education Commission to provide them the tools to get those programs up to snuff to meet the requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Nally. And first, I also just want to echo my gratitude to you, Executive Director Rachel Stevens Parker, and the entire GWDB team for your partnership. Exactly what Mr. Nally said, the technical assistance will be incredibly important. I also want to recognize Assistant Secretary Dr. Emily Dow for her efforts. We've been directly communicating also with the continuing education group at the community colleges, as well as others, to make sure that they've been informed about this opportunity along the way. I think making sure that our institutions have the data around which programs are eligible for Workforce Pell and how close are they to being eligible if they're not right now will be incredibly important. So shout out to some of the staff at MHEC who are also running those analyses to make sure that we can provide that data to our institutions. The technical assistance will be incredibly important. The other piece that I would offer is strengthening those relationships with our employers. The 70% job placement rate is really looking at the partnership between higher education and workforce. So that is something that we look forward to strengthening as well. Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Agu.
And so just a little bit repeat it for myself so I understand it. So one, with the technical assistance, we want to take programs that are close to being eligible or could be eligible and help them become eligible by being more effective, job placement rate, all that. Then number two, we want employers to really on the job placement rate. And no one in the very few programs in the country meet those thresholds, just very candidly. And so this is not just a Maryland problem, it's a national problem. We want to make sure that we can get that rate up as well. But I just want to say it out loud, because one thing I want to be clear to students is that it will not be tomorrow that there are hundreds and thousands of credentials available. We're gonna have to work up to that, and we want to make sure on our side that we're doing that. So just thank you so much again for the answer as well as all the work so far.
Thank you, Vice Chair Agu. It does seem that at some point, once we're through the initial implementation phase, that it could be useful to do some goal setting as well, long-term goal setting around the number of programs that we'd like to see be eligible, going back to the state plan and this concept of student choice. So that's something that we could also revisit as part of state plan implementation if there's interest.
Wonderful.
There is deep interest.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? All right, Mr. Nally, you were so thorough. You just only got the one question. Thank you so much for your time today and for all of your work on this.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an action item regarding the adoption of the Conroy and Cryer guidelines. So I will hand the floor over to Executive Director Al Dorsett, who will introduce Program Manager Ms. Shawnice King to present these guidelines to the Commission. Mr. Dorsett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 1 minute while I share my slides. And before I move forward, let me first say again, good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and Secretary. Before we begin today's proposal regarding the Conroy and Cryer institutional allocations and related guidelines, I would like to first express my sincere appreciation for your continued commitment to higher education, educational access across the state of Maryland. Your leadership and support remain critically important as we work collectively to ensure students and families have meaningful opportunities to pursue post-secondary education. I would like to extend our gratitude to the Governor's Office, the Maryland Department of Budget and Management, and our institutional partners across the state for their continued collaboration and partnership. This legislative session presents significant fiscal challenges and difficult budget realities, and we are especially appreciative of the understanding, flexibility, and thoughtful engagement demonstrated throughout this process. Despite these constraints, Maryland's shared commitment to supporting students has remained clear. The partnership between the Commission, state leadership, and our institutions continues to reflect a collective focus on maintaining access, affordability, and operational stability for Maryland students. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our program manager, Ms. Shawnice King, that is going to do a briefing on the Conroy Inquirer Scholarship Program, proposed allocation and framework. Ms. King.
Thank you, Al. Good morning, commissioners and all on the call. My name is Shawnice King, and as stated today, I will outline the proposed allocation framework and guidelines for the Edward T. and Mary A. Conroy and Jean B. Cryer Memorial Scholarship. The Conroy and Cryer Memorial Scholarship Program provides financial assistance to Maryland school employees and military personnel who are attending eligible Maryland institutions, as well as supporting their eligible spouses and dependent children. While the scholarship program has provided critical support to Maryland families, growing demand and rising costs across multiple years have created significant fiscal challenges that required a more sustainable approach. This led MHEC to do a comprehensive review of the program structure and funding model. Historically, the program operates under a retroactive reimbursement structure, which led to fiscal uncertainty. MHEC worked collaboratively with the Governor's Office and the Maryland General Assembly and other external stakeholders to develop an allocation methodology that aligned with the program's purpose and adopted legislation. The proposed framework positions the program for long-term sustainability and improves fiscal oversight while maintaining student success. But to fully understand the rationale behind this proposal, we must look at the current fiscal imbalance facing the program. For fiscal year 2026, the state appropriation for the program is $7 million. However, the current program expenditures for the program total $16.5 million, which community colleges make up $1.5 million, private institutions making up $2.2 million, and public institutions making up $12.8 million. The increasing number of eligible recipients combined with the rising institutional costs have significantly increased fiscal pressure on the program. And so implementing a segment-based award allocation and guidelines provide a more sustainable and equitable framework for distributing program funding while still maximizing student impact. The recommendation is to shift from a retroactive post-award approach. The previous model has no budget controls, which created exposure to ongoing deficits. The proposed model introduces a hard funding cap of $7 million, which ensures financial discipline. Award amounts will still remain flexible by institution, preserving fairness and adaptability. And overall, this pivot would maximize student access while keeping expenditures within budget. In collaboration with the Governor's Office, we determined how funding would be distributed within this framework, which would be a two-phase approach. To ensure equitable distribution of the funds, MHEC established an allocation percentage for each institutional segment using prior year program data. A percentage of the $7 million appropriation was designated to community colleges, private institutions, and public institutions. Within each segment, institutional allocations were then determined based on the number of eligible recipients at each institution. This two-phase approach ensures participating institutions receive funding amounts that align with program participation and projected student demand. To support the proposed allocation methodology, MHEC developed recommended maximum award amounts for each institutional segment based on the statutory minimum and maximum award thresholds. Based on the funding allocated to each segment and the corresponding number of eligible students, MHEC identified suggested award levels intended to maximize the program's reach while still allowing participating institutions discretion in determining individual student awards. Overall, this approach promotes fairness, consistency, and responsible stewardship of program funds across all institutional segments. Within this proposed model, we also developed a prioritization chart that ensures awards made by institutions align with statutory guidelines. Tier 1 would prioritize awarding current recipients before funding new applicants. And Tier 2, if funding remains, will focus on awarding new applicants. If demand exceeds available funding within any tier, awards may be prorated based on the institution's needs. Beyond strengthening fiscal sustainability, the proposed model introduces a series of operational standards designed to reinforce program oversight, enhance collaboration with participating institutions, and promote consistent administration of scholarship funds. These improvements include increased mandatory reporting requirements to support more timely monitoring of program activity and spending, enhanced eligibility verification procedures to ensure accuracy and compliance in student award determinations, and clearly defined duration limits to promote equitable access. By transitioning from an open-ended reimbursement model to a data-driven allocation framework, the suggested path forward positions the program for long-term sustainability while maintaining support for Maryland students. If approved, MHEC would move forward with notifying participating institutions in the coming weeks regarding the program guidelines and institutional allocation amounts. So based on this comprehensive review and collaborative efforts taken to strengthen the program's fiscal and operational framework, it is recommended that the Commission approve the proposed administrative guidelines and funding allocation methodology for the Conroy and Crier Memorial Scholarship Program. Thank you for your time and consideration. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. King. Any questions from the commission?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the recommendation.
Second.
Any discussion? Commissioner Williams.
Yes, good morning. Just a quick suggestion with regard to these scholarships. I think it's important as a commission for us to remember who these people were. Many of you probably worked with them. I had the ability to work with Delegate Crier years ago. She was a delegate and a journalist, very successful in Montgomery County. Delegate Conroy, I think, was in the legislature for 20 years and made significant contributions. And her husband was a decorated Korean War veteran who won the Purple Heart and was injured. So these are real people. And I think it's important in the future, just a humble recommendation, Madam Chair, that when we review these important scholarships, we potentially include just a brief paragraph on these individuals and their background and why they are honored with these scholarships. The same would apply to Delegate Chairman Rawlings, who is a giant in the legislature, and we have so much to thank him for, and others that are named. But it occurred to me as we were reviewing these, including the fiscal responsibility around your recommendations, which I support, that we recognize who they were and why they're honored here today.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. That's a great idea, particularly this Memorial Day week for this particular scholarship. And it would be great if the agency staff team could include that moving forward pursuant to Commissioner Williams' suggestion. Very good idea. Vice Chair Agu.
No, I'm pretty sure I support the underlying changes. I think one recommendation I have, and it's a question I think we've all brought up before, which is whenever we change how a program is run, it affects the people who are going to use it, and they have to understand it. What would always be helpful, and I know you all think about this and do this, but just that communications plan to the folks who will be affected so that they understand the change. And again, I know we'll make it available on the website. I know we'll make it available our channels, but I think we find generally, I think all of us who are commissioners, we bump into people who, even with all that, still are not aware. Oh, I had no idea this changed. Oh, shit, I thought it was like this, so on and so forth. And so again, I'm looking at Commissioner Dukes, who has talked about this kind of making sure that this kind of community-based organization strategy, so on and so forth. And so again, I support the changes, but whether it be for kind of that next meeting or something after that, just how are we going to communicate these changes, particularly in this time around all the changes in uncertainty in financial aid, so folks are aware. So not to affect this vote, but I think would love to have that attached to these types of recommendations going forward, so that we can know, hey, so we know that students will know the changes that are being made, because that's kind of the last mile, which is most important.
Excellent point.
And
Any other discussion or questions?
if I may, first, thank you, Commissioner Williams. I think that's an incredibly important strategy that we should undertake. And we definitely start with the historical context at the agency, trying to understand the rationale, and I think honoring the folks, either the folks who the scholarships are named after or who are intended recipients, is incredibly important. We had this conversation last week around how we see ourselves as a student-centered agency, and so we can definitely incorporate that information moving forward to keep us grounded. And Vice Chair Agu, to your point, thank you so much. I want to, if I may, we do have Chip Brown, who's a director of communications here. He is a member of almost every conversation related to financial aid, because we do understand the importance of communication. So we can incorporate that moving forward into future plans. And I believe I saw earlier on the call Ms. Ramona Hardin, and I'm happy to say that we have added a new, and you all know that we have 1-member bands here at MHEC. So we have a 1-member communications team. We have a 1-member outreach team, which is better than a 0-member outreach team. And so Ms. Hardin has joined us, and we can certainly make sure that this is part of our outreach strategy and as we think about the communications plan. So let me repeat what I'm hearing in the future. Let's have some historical context and honor the folks that we are who have these scholarships named after them. And then as we're changing program guidelines, let's bring updates to the commission regarding the communications plan.
Excellent. Thank you, Interim Secretary
Thank you.
Quiroz Levanis. I believe Commissioner Burnham had made a motion and there was a second. Before we take a vote, any other further comments or discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposition or abstention? All right. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The guidelines are adopted. Moving along, our next item requires a vote on enrollment projections. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Assistant Secretary Dom Ayanta to get us started, and he will then hand it over to Mr. Dan Schuster, our Capital Finance Analyst, for the details. So Mr. Ayanta, the floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Agu, Madam Secretary. I apologize. There's some bad weather in Baltimore here, so I think I'm half frozen on camera. Sorry about that. I'd like to hand it over to Dan Schuster, who is our one-man capital budget team, if you will, and subject matter expert. Thanks, Dan. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dom. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. If folks can acknowledge that they see it when it comes up, I would appreciate it.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Very good. Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Dan Schuster. I'm the Capital Finance Analyst here at MHEC, and I'm going to be presenting today this action item to accept our 10-year enrollment projections for the public institutions of higher education in the state of Maryland. Before proceeding, I would like to say that the work on this was done primarily by Dr. Yushin Lin, who's currently out on parental leave. So I'm going to be doing the best I can to explain what she does to arrive at these numbers. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how we use them, which is primarily in my realm of capital planning and capital projects. So with that, first of all, a little bit of background This report is required by COMAR, as you can see on the citation here, and it is something that needs to be updated and adopted annually for purposes of capital planning, as we mentioned. So why is it that we require these projections, and how do they affect the capital budget? Well, we need to examine the current and projected capacity needs at all of our campuses using one statewide set of assumptions about how many students realistically we need to provide space for, since you don't want to overbuild your space and you don't want to rely on the institution's own projections since they're in competition with each other. So we need one statewide set of numbers that we all agree on. And for the capital budget, the projected enrollment really only comes into play when you're analyzing projects that are seeking to expand capacity. Many of the projects that we see now are not proposing to do that. There's a lot of projects that are simply proposing to renovate and update old buildings or to redesign space because it doesn't quite work for what it's being used for now. It was designed for other purposes. And for community colleges especially, generally over the last few years, capacity has not been an issue. As you'll see when we get to the numbers, enrollment has been going down for about 15 years or so at the community colleges. And so even though we're projecting enrollment to increase again, it's only going to increase back to numbers that we've seen around 2014 or thereabouts. And so this means that most of those campuses now have a surplus of space at this point in time, so they're not really proposing projects that are designed to increase capacity. But regardless of that, these projections are still going to be important for capital planning purposes. They're going to help the institutions decide which projects to start to plan for or not. And so, for example, if you do have a surplus of space on your campus, and let's say that we were projecting your enrollment to go downward, which we're not, but if you were, eventually you would need to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this excess space, or how are we going to repurpose it for some other needs? But because we're projecting the enrollment to increase, okay, you might want to hold on to that capacity for future need. Likewise, if you are at capacity at your campus right now and we're projecting enrollment to increase, that's when you may want to consider projects to expand capacity. Okay, let's talk now a little bit about the model that we use and how we arrive at the numbers that I'm going to show you in a minute. So this is the same model that we have always been using. It's just simply that we're entering the most recent data into it. Okay, and it's basically a top-down model. We start with information we get from the Department of Planning about what the population profile within the state of Maryland is going to be 10 years from now, broken down by age and gender and so forth. And then we look at the historical relationship between that population profile and enrollment to estimate, okay, how many individuals who are going to be living in Maryland at that time are likely to be attending college, and in what capacity. Are they going to be full-time or part-time? Are they going to be undergrad students at the four-year schools or community colleges? Or are they going to be grad students? Okay, and then from there, we break it down by campus. So we say, okay, we have this many full-time students who are undergrad at the four-year schools. Which of the campuses are they going to? And so on. And then once we have those headcount numbers, we have to convert that into FTE or full-time equivalency. And that's based on the historical relationships that we see at each of the campuses between headcount and FTE numbers. And then for community colleges, we do a separate, different analysis on the non-credit side, because non-credit instruction does now factor into our space needs calculations for community colleges only. Okay, so here are some of the steps that Dr. Lynn undertook when she ran the numbers for 2035. Okay, again, we start with a profile of the 2035 population, and she runs a regression analysis by age and gender groupings, again, using historical data to say, okay, if the population looks like this, these are how many people are likely to be attending college in which capacity. And I should point out that in this analysis, we're looking at each of the different cohorts of population by age and gender in the year 2035 and trying to predict how many members of each of those cohorts are going to be attending college. And so, for example, yeah, there's going to be a higher percentage of the 20 to 24-year-old cohorts that are going to be attending college, but some of the older cohorts, there's going to be some percentage of those people who are going to be attending college as well. And so the model looks at all of that, the whole population, and the historical percentages of each of the cohorts that attend college, and predicts how many Marylanders of that 2035 population, therefore, are going to be attending college, either in a full-time or part-time capacity. So then there's some adjusting factors that are integrated into the model, and that's due to assumptions that are made about how things like high school graduation rates and disposable income are going to affect who goes to college in what capacity. And so now we have a number of 2035 Marylanders who are going to be attending school in the state of Maryland, but that's not the end of the enrollment projections, because we also have to add in the out-of-state students. All the campuses have some out-of-state students. And so we add those in by assuming that the ratio of in-state to out-of-state students at each campus is consistent with the last year of actual enrollment data.
Mr.
So now we
Schuster,
hit.
sorry, may I
Yes.
ask you a quick question? I know that
Sure.
you're the capital guy, you're not the enrollment projection guy, and you're standing in for your colleague, and I appreciate that. But I'm hoping you know the answer to this. When we talked about this same topic a couple of years ago, we asked about this national enrollment cliff, where there was a national dip in the birth rate in 2008, perhaps because of the recession, leading to fewer 18-year-olds now in 2026, leading to fewer students going to college. And I believe we were told that that wasn't as much of an issue in Maryland as it is in other parts of the country. I was just wondering, wearing either your capital hat or your enrollment projections hat, has that actually come to pass, that we haven't really seen the enrollment cliff here? And what do you predict for the next decade?
Well, we'll see I'll show you the projection numbers in a second. But the short answer is that cliff isn't evident in the next 10 years. Again, the data that we get starts with what does the population look like in Maryland in 2035. Okay, and so if there are less of the 20 to 24-year-old, primary college cohort at that time, okay, that's factored into this analysis.
Right.
As are all of the other age groups as well. And so we're baked together, we're not seeing that enrollment cliff, at least within the next 10 years, based on the data that's available to us. And Dr. Schmertz is available here, and I see she has her hand up, and she may be able to add a little bit of context to that.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Schuster. And thank you in advance, Dr. Schmertz.
Sure. It's a great question. And one we actually are keeping an eye on. Dan is correct. The projections will assume, so for example, if the state projection model for the state population shows a shrinking, as is predicted for our high school going population, that is but one population that will be in demand, and the model would sort of adjust for that. We did put out a brief last year using projection data, so we can all have a respect for the changeability of projection data. And at the time of those projections, there are two that we triangulate with. Well, you can't triangulate with the two. We positioned two together to sort of form our argument. One was from WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission. They do something called knocking at your college door, where they use nationwide projections. They then divide them into states, and they try to track the sort of changes in high school population among states. We coupled that with the federal government's own Department of Education projections, and found that Maryland will stay fairly flat compared to some of these cliffs. So where we took a stand was to say There will be a small decrease. It will not be, so there would be a diminishment, but not a cliff. And then we charged the state with being mindful of that because the surrounding states will face some more cliff issues. So they should be doing more at the campus level to really attract in-state students and keep them because other people may be pulling them away. Fast forward 1 year, WICHE has not updated their projections. And I do believe, as far as I can tell, due to the changes in support and staffing at the Department of Education, there is no new projections for us to update. So I give you that answer to say the data we have combined with the data that Dan already referenced gives us some semblance of our high school population will not go as cliffy as others. A. B, our model adapts for other populations in demand. C, we continue to keep an eye on this very important trend to see whether once we get updated data, we can give a better portrait for lots of constituencies, not just this projections, but all kinds of things having to do with the policy space here in the state. So know that we are mindful of it and we are keeping tabs on it. But the data that you see here kind of comes at it at a slightly different angle. So great question. Hope that answers your question satisfactorily.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Mr. Schuster, back to you.
Yes, and again, and these are why we update this model every year with numbers from the the next year. And hopefully, we'll see any trends that are becoming apparent. So as I mentioned, now we have I showed you how we get our headcount numbers. Let's look at some of the data. First here we see for community colleges, the headcount enrollment projections, historical and projected. The sort of reddish lines are the part-time students, whereas the black line are the full-time students. And as you can see here, the enrollment did decline over the period of time, 2010 onward to about 2022 or so. And then since then, though, we have seen an increase in both of these figures. And our model is projecting that those increases are going to continue. For the part-time side, we are seeing, or the model is predicting that in 2035, we're going to see about 87,000 students, which is similar to the number that that did attend back in 2014. And on the full-time side, the model is saying that it's going to be up to about 40,000, which is similar to the number in about 2016 or so. And I believe somebody raised their hand.
I did. This is Barbara Howe. I compliment you on all the work that you do with this. I personally believe, it's only my personal belief, that we are living in a very shaky economic time right now. And I think that makes it even more difficult for you to do these projections. So I compliment you on what you've been able to do. And that's just a comment, not really a question. Thank you.
Very good. I appreciate it. I think a couple other hands have been raised.
I see Commissioner Polonio also has her hand up.
Oops.
And you
sorry, I was trying to get my voice back on. There's a movement in higher education towards acceleration. In other words, the one-year degree, the collaboration with K through 12, so you have more students graduating both with a high school diploma with the associate program. The data is contrary to a certain extent to what we hear that students want, which is to get in and get out. So, and I apologize if this has been discussed, but I just want to put it out there. Should there be a major initiative to try to get part-time students to become full-time students? Because other institutions, particularly community colleges, are sticking with mainly having part-time students and even the four-year school, but other, particularly private institutions, are really promoting the 3-year baccalaureate degree. And getting started in college while you're still in high school. Well, that started with the community colleges. A lot of four-year schools are also planning to get into the game. My question doesn't need to be answered. It's just, is anybody even discussing that this is contrary to what the consumer is saying?
There are definitely a lot of dual enrollment initiatives and early college. Chancellor Perman at the University System of Maryland is advocating for an early college model. So it's a good question, and I think a timely one, and one that is certainly being thought about here in Maryland, I would say.
Right. The number of credits being required for a baccalaureate and undergrad and a community college degree is part of the examination that needs to take place. The desire is there, but we're not looking at it to what the issue is. How many credits should constitute an associate degree, and how many credits should constitute a baccalaureate degree? Sorry, just wanted to bring it up. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right.
Okay.
Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, thank you for the detail here. I know you're pinch hitting a little bit for Dr. Lynn on the methodology. Maybe it's a question for Dr. Schmertz, possibly, but do you know how our methodology for calculation of enrollment over the next decade compares with how other states' methodologies are calculated?
From my understanding, we are one of the only states that I can find that is actually tasked with a 10-year projection for capital projects only. So it's a very niche request with a very niche set of needs. If we broaden like to just are there states and SHIOs preparing projected enrollments for lots of planning, budget planning, space, capacity planning, maybe policy planning. There are, from what I can tell, the informal poll that I've done, there's a number of methods. Typically, what states may do is ask every institution to provide their projections, and then they add them all up into a big number. Right. So maybe your is because that has its strengths and weaknesses. It is also for, and it has its place. I would argue that colleges are much more well positioned to inform a nuanced model around, we've all been, if you've not been to St. Mary's, you know that St. Mary's may not be able to expand to the capacity we would imagine for St. Mary's, which is why the model starts large and says there are this many Marylanders who will need to be educated, and then we will disperse them across campuses based on current demand and current capacity. Now, does that mean, because it's a regression model, we do know that a regression model by its nature will continue to have a line one way or the other. So it is a challenge for places that we know have constraints. You can see in that kind of model, add them all up means that St. Mary's gets a say in saying, well, we've only ever projected to have 1,000 students, or 1,200 at most. That is all we can do. So we could say, well, we respect that, but could we have a conversation about growing? If every college did that and said, we don't really want to grow, we would be at a loss to figure out where we can put people. So there's not one model. I will say we have been approached by other states to ask how we do our model, because they have recognized I think the complexities or the flaws, challenges of add them all up, a bottom up, you know. So I hope that satisfies your, and I will then really emphasize, these projections are not to be extrapolated for all kinds of other reasons. And we've tried to make that clear to DBM. And in fact, we had a great, Dom and Dan and I had a great conversation with DBM about their needs to help them, because they are relying on these numbers for what they're intended.
Good.
They're not intended for that. Yeah.
Glad you shared that. That's kind of where I was heading. And that makes good sense. It's an art and a science, and they're only for specific purposes. And I think in general, it's good for MHEC to be aware of how other states approach lots of things that we are charged to do. And I often ask the landscape question on other parts of our duties. One other quick point, which I think, you know, this is what we all are grappling with, is over the next 10 years, a significant intervening variable, which we didn't have in previous years, was the acceleration of AI and how, and it's really hard to predict how, I would imagine, how the entrance of AI is going to change and accelerate and modify higher education in so many ways over the next 10 years that may affect your headcount enrollment. And I just
Sure.
wonder if you gave any sort of qualitative treatment to that or quantitative treatment to that as an intervening variable over the next 10 years that never existed before.
So great point. And I think we would all say that this is just would be one on a large list of ways in which AI may affect education, right? Both from demand, delivery, curriculum, perhaps the actual use of spaces. I mean,
Sure.
to Dan's intro remarks are, this is about buildings. And
But certainly in enrollment, it could also potentially affect enrollment trends.
Yes.
Right.
I think I also take comfort in Dan saying that this isn't about let's just build a building, but these capital projects are used to enhance existing structures. So let's project one vision for the 10 years from now and all the ways in which AI may affect things. Sure, we could look back and be like, wow, that interesting library is an actual interesting artifact from a bygone era that is now the library museum because we have changed so greatly. But it could also mean that the capital money was meant to enhance the biology and English buildings in, the liberal arts buildings into spaces that meet enrollment demand, because enrollment demand may not be butts and seats, but maybe just like we all kind of, and I'm not diminishing your concern at all.
No,
AI is way more significant.
To this, right?
But we were scared at COVID that COVID would make people only want to learn online and buildings would become unnecessary. And we are not seeing some of that play out. So I do want to trust the campuses. Let me tell you, if we're worried about AI, they are also worried about AI and what this means for their enrollment. The other answer is the model will correct for itself every year. So there is space. We don't have to be, we will continue to keep our eye on this and we will see this through enrollment trends and we will then know what to do or can adapt. We also, what is not mentioned in this presentation, but what we now do with the arrival of Dr. Lin is we run two models. One is a smoothing model, which has its economic methodology and its strengths. It does not rely on a regression line forever. And we bring that forward every year internally to say, is this the model we want to move? And the smoothing model would be more responsive to the most recent trends of enrollment change. But what comes with that, what we found is it will project some schools will go to very low enrollments. So we have that in our back pocket to be both a tool we use internally and that we may bring to you. But the model does not, unfortunately, it's not, I mean, it is a economic quantitative model that uses qualitative things like demand and change in pattern and changes to the population to inform it.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thanks for the context. It's just something that we're all grappling with.
Sure.
And Madam Interim Secretary, you may think about in the future how we might, as a commission, more actively track and estimate and be more engaged in the entire trends, not just in this specific headcount enrollment. Right. There's so many, as you mentioned, so many areas that things are just rapidly changing. And I just feel like we may want to have a standing work group. You may want to have some architecture or governance around this. I know there's so much that each of our institutions are doing, including ours. So I'll stop there, but thank you for the context.
And I'll just offer Commissioner Williams, you're spot on as always with your questions. I similarly am always interested in what's happening in other states, particularly as a student of what we do here in state higher ed policy. But similarly, I do just want to offer that there is a statewide sub-cabinet on AI that's being led by the governor and his team. And so we continue to participate in that space. There's also been an incredible investment by the General Assembly in an AI hub at the University System of Maryland. So making sure that we continue to stay engaged in those conversations and help support the coordination across the post-secondary ecosystem will be critical for us. Thank you again for those points. And I see Vice Chair Agu also has his hand up.
hopefully this will be quick, and it's probably for Dr. Schmertz. One, I think for us as commissioners, generally, I would argue, and it bears on my question, the thing that'll affect these numbers the most is to how many Marylanders can higher education provide a value and provide a utility. And so as we think about the state plan, as we think about kind of what each university is doing, the more demand there is, the more these numbers change. And so in some ways, I would not say that there's simply acts of God, but also kind of what institutions is we as a system do. Dr. Schmertz, my question for you is, can you just talk about the age groups that are included? I mean, right now, and I think a lot of us who've been in higher ed for a while or around it have been talking about the first-time full-time freshman. I don't want to say it's a myth, but the classic 17-year-old who goes off to school is a decreasing proportion of who is served by these institutions. So can you talk about beyond the kind of quote unquote that classic youth demographic, what other age groups or other populations are included in this projection?
So great question. The state's projections are where we begin, right? So the Department of Planning estimates, as I alluded to in an earlier response about the possible high school cliff, the standard census age bands that you would 18 to 24, 25. So those are within our analyses. 18 to, I'll have to follow up with you. We could cap it at 50 something, or we might go all the way to the 64, just like the traditional bands in census work. So that is where we start from. So to your point, we do capture the population of adult learners that would so say they're estimating that the surge of state population might come in a couple different buckets, and one of them might be 18 to 34-year-old men. Our model adapts for that. Again, this is presuming that the state's population is a demand source, and we are assuming some constancies. So then we go to the campus level. So then we use our actual enrollment. We break that into similar age bands. They're a little more fine-grained, and they're actually male and female as well. So hence the 100 and something regressions are every combination, 18 to 20, 22 female, male, part-time, full-time. So we adapt for the enrollment intensity, the gender, the age band, which I think we're all sensitive to, things like diminishment of males attending, more people to earlier comment, more people attending part-time. So we don't force, so we use the existing data to say, if we presume some constancies, and this is the way in which enrollment looks right now, we will apply that. But we also have coming from it, oh, well, there might be more 18 to 34-year-old males. And so the model sort of takes that into account. I hope I'm answering that very correctly. I'm also happy to prepare a much better response once Dr. Lin arrives with words that actually all make sense together.
No. That actually says, I mean, what I'm imagining is you all are, frankly, there's like an age curve, and I imagine that there's a hump around 18 to 30, but then we know there will be other people, whether it's people who are looking to reskill, looking to go back, whether it's so on and so forth, and you all make a determination of the probability or the probability of a certain proportion of that age group going back. All that makes sense. I want to say it out loud just to make sure. I assume that, but I want to say it out loud just to make sure, because that also will impact. I'm going back to the community college numbers, where effectively what we saw was the professional certification population. We're going to start using that term, not non-credit, not part-time, but professional certifications population will likely get back to pre-pandemic or where we were in 2010. But what we saw on the traditional credit side was, candidly, I think I saw the number was something like in the 90,000s or something like that, or I forget where it was, but it was almost a 2/3 drop compared to where we were in 2010. In my head, that makes sense, assuming we have a older working age population who's going there to potentially reskill, go back into the field on a regular basis. So anyway, thank you for that answer. And I think for us as commissioners, we have to keep remembering that, again, first time, full time is a part of the population, but only a part.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, I do have a couple more slides to get to before we do the voting items. So let me run through those really quickly here. This chart here is the four-year school undergraduate head count. The yellow line is full-time, the blue line is part-time, and you can see for each of these, we've seen a gradual increase in the enrollment over the last 15 years, and we're projecting that that gradual increase is going to continue. Next, for the graduate students, on this chart, the purple line is part-time, the green line is the full-time. For part-time, we can see there was a downward trend that has been picking up in recent years, and the model is projecting that that enrollment is going to increase back up to historical norms. On the full-time side, we can see that same sort of gradual upward trend that the model is projecting will continue. Okay, so we have the headcount enrollments. Now, as I mentioned, we have to convert that into FTE. And again, that's done based on the historical relationship at each campus between the part-time and full-time headcounts and what the FTE numbers at that campus have historically been. And here we see that the four-year undergraduate FTE is projected to increase about 12.5% from 2024 to 2035. For the community colleges, on the credit side, it's going to be about 21% increase. On the non-credit side, it's going to be about 6% increase. And I will note that these, the base year on this slide is 2024 instead of 2025. And that's because these base numbers are numbers that are published in budget books and reports that are available at fiscal year end. Currently, the numbers that we have available are from FY25, which is the fall 24 numbers. And that's why they're used here. All right, so what do these figures ultimately tell us? Again, as I mentioned before, for community colleges, those that are planning projects at campuses can assume that enrollment is likely going to increase to FTE levels that we saw back in 2014 or so. And this can help them decide which projects to pursue or not. For four-year schools, the model continues to be reasonably accurate over the years, and the moderate increases are expected to continue, and institutions should plan accordingly. We've already gone through a bunch of questions, but I will pause again in case there's any additional questions before we move on to the item to vote on.
Thanks, Mr. Schuster. Any questions or comments for Mr. Schuster before we ask for a motion? No? All right.
I move we accept the recommendation as stated.
Thank you, Vice Chair Agu. Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays or abstentions? All right. The enrollment projections are approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Schuster
Thank you all.
and Dr. Schmertz. All right, next on the agenda, we'll hear updates on our legislative reports. Ms. Megan Music is leading this update for us today. Ms. Music, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Motz. Today, I will be presenting to the Commission with an overview of the rapidly expanding reporting landscape that is facing MHEC following the 2026 legislative session. So in April, during our commission meeting, I gave a very high-level overview of what came out of this session. So this presentation is going into a bit more detail on our legislative reports. I'm going to walk through the scale of the increase, the operational implications, as well as the systems we are implementing within the agency to manage these requests moving forward. So on this slide here, you can see within the 2026 legislative session, we have had 15 new reporting requirements. We had 47 existing legislative mandated reports. And just for reference, I wanted to redefine the reports. So legislative mandated reports are reports that come out of legislation, usually tied to new legislation, can be one-time reoccurring. JCRs are joint chairman's reports. Joint chairman's reports come from the budget committees. Within the budget committees, they make amendments, provide additional information that they may be requesting from the agency, essentially, to go through and say, we need this information. These are one time and can have funding restrictions. So now in total, MHEC will have 62 reports. This is the 15 new reporting requirements, including our JCRs, as well as the 47 existing mandated reports. This does represent a major expansion in the administrative workload and the coordination that will be required across our agency. So these reports are no longer isolated deliverables. They're going to require our cross-divisional collaboration, complex data validation, legal and fiscal review, as well as a coordinated submission process involving DLS, DBM, the governor's office. So it's really expansive on our agency. And like I mentioned, it's more so we are going from informational to operational. So in 2025, MHEC had 5 JCR reports. None had a funding restriction, and there was no funding at risk tied to these reporting compliance. 2026, we doubled the number to 10 JCR reports. 4 have funding restrictions, which places approximately $1.4 million at risk. This reflects a broader shift towards the operational accountability, where reporting compliance is now directly connected to fiscal oversight and the agency's performance expectations. So briefly, before I get into the details of each of these reports, I wanted to just highlight what MHEC's reporting process is. So in response to legislative session, the Office of External Affairs had developed a standardized reporting workflow, an SOP to improve coordination and compliance management. So this process is centralizing tracking, the drafting timelines, internal review, executive approvals, and the final submission. And so what we have done is we start with the due date and we essentially work backwards. So based on when the report is going to be due, we set internal due dates for ourselves to make sure that we are submitting to the governor's office and DBM well in advance of the actual due date to the Department of Legislative Services. And the goal of this process is to reduce our risk, improve our consistency, ensure that our reports are fully vetted before submission. And this is also helping to create clearer accountability across our different divisions, because not all reports, for example, are housed within the Office of Student Financial Aid or within academic affairs. There are reports that are scattered across the entire agency with different team leads. So it also is ensuring that accountability across our divisions and that leadership visibility within the reporting status. So going into the restriction of funds, as I mentioned, we have 4 reports that are restricting our funds. So this is approximately 1.4 million as connected to our reporting related funding restrictions and legislative oversight provisions. So what this means is that reporting is no longer simply the administrative exercise. It now has the direct implications for our agency's operations. So it's going to be very important for us to have timely and accurate reporting to maintain compliance and avoid potential funding impacts. So as you hear, this is each of the 4 reports related to funding. These are the joint chairman's report. So this has come out of the budget committees. And I'm going to move in to talk about what each of these 4 reports requires and where we are in the status update.
I think Vice Chair Agu has a question.
Really quick question. The funding that this 1.4 million, is this general administrative funding for the agency and staff itself? Okay, that's what I
Yes.
thought. Okay, got it. So doubly important. Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And so, as mentioned, yes, this goes across to just MHEC's general budget. It's not, for example, housed within the Office of Student Financial Aid scholarship budget. It is impacting MHEC's direct budget. So the first report that we have that is a JCR is the GA Grant and Teaching Fellow Scholarship. So with this one, we have here I have the requirements. Essentially, we are submitting a report to the budget committees on the errors related to the GA grant and teaching fellows for Maryland Scholarship in the recent award cycle. The lead of this is the Office of Student Financial Aid, and the status is that it's already drafted. It is with the internal review and edits status. So it is with the Office of External Affairs for reviews, and then will work its way up to the secretary to then go to the governor's office and DBM for approval. The due date is July 15th. And here at the bottom of the screen, I know it may be small for some, is kind of an example of how we work backwards. So within a spreadsheet, we start with the actual due date, like I mentioned, and then set timelines that then go backwards. So you can see the start date of the report was around April 27th. The aimed data collection due date for what was needed was May 12th. The analysis and drafting due date, so that initial draft was actually today, May 27th. The Office of Student Financial Aid has completed it in advance of that due date, so it's now within the internal review stage. We'll have the final draft aimed to be done by June 6th, to then be able to go to the secretary and, like I said, to the governor's office DBM ahead of final submission. For our next slide it's the actions to address audit findings. This report is requiring MHEC to submit a report pertaining to those March 2025 audit findings. And this was a big conversation during our budget hearings during the legislative session. The lead of this is the Finance and Administration Office. The status is currently in progress. It's in the drafting stages, and the due date is August 15th of 2026. So this is a particularly important report because it's demonstrating how MHEC's corrective actions and operational improvements following the audit process. And like I said, it was a big part of the budget committee during session, and so it's going to be very important that we have up-to-date report to get to the legislature. The next report that we have is the report on post-secondary outcomes for the NGS senior students. Essentially, this is a report that we also had last year as a JCR. Just this year, it is restricting funds. The office lead is the Student Financial Aid Office. The status is in progress, also in the drafting stages, and it is not due until December 10th of 2026. And then the last report from the JCRs that restricted funding is the report on financial details of grants, scholarships, and loan assistance repayment programs. Now, this is our biggest restriction. It is $1 million. So essentially what is being asked of MHEC is to submit a report that is detailing for each fiscal year, starting with 2020 and going all the way through 2025, the appropriation and usage of funds for each of the grants, scholarships, and loan assistance repayment programs administered by MHEC. And so, like I said, this is asking for appropriations, expenditures, deficits, surpluses, if money was transferred, and explanations regarding funding movement between programs. So this report specifically is being led by the Office of Student Financial Assistance. It is in the drafting stages, but is going to require significant coordination between our OSFA team and our finance and administration team. And that is the last report we have that requires restriction of funds. The remaining reports that I'm going to briefly highlight are focused on compliance oversight without the restriction of funding. So we have 6 new JCR reports that do not restrict any funding. So there's no fiscal penalties. These do not carry the immediate funding implications, but they still require staff capacity, data collection, internal review, and our executive coordination. These are all, again, one-time reports that will be submitted to the budget committees. And again, they continue to expand the agency's operational compliance footprint. So as you can see, we start in November. We have the credit completion requirements for community college students, the study that's going to be on the public service loan forgiveness program, or the potential for one, and what that may look like. tuition exemption for incarcerated individuals study, an impact of credit completion requirements on financial aid rewards report. We have the capital budget report. And then lastly, you have the report that is on relocating the Office of Student Financial Assistance. This will not be authored by MHEC, but MHEC is to coordinate with the Department of Legislative Services on this report. So DLS will be leading it. They will reach out to us and we will work with them based on what they plan to do for the study on relocating OSFA. Next, we have the legislative mandated report. So again, this is different in the sense of it is not from the budget committees. It is just associated with legislation that is passed throughout session. So you can see we have 3 here that are going to be annual reports. So they're going to be every year. And we have 2 that are one-time reports. We have SB 509, which is our Workforce Pell Data Report, and this is going to be coordination with the Governor's Workforce and Development Board. We have the over-the-counter contraceptive access report. This is actually a report that MHEC already does, but we do it with community colleges. So public institutions have been added here. So that is just the main shift. It's the same due date. It is just adding additional institutions to this reporting requirement. Then we have the direct admission study. This is now shifting into 2027. And this report will be requiring coordination with MSDE and our institutions to go ahead and conduct that study and provide the information to the legislature. We then have the pregnant and parenting students plan and reporting. This will become annual in 2027 and is the collection of data from institutions related to pregnant and parenting students that then will be summarized in a report and submitted from MHEC. And then lastly, we have the Southern Maryland Early College Teacher Pathway Work Group. This is not an actual report that is going to be authored by MHEC, and MHEC is responsible for submitting. This is just to show that MHEC will have to sit and have a representative on this work group, and there is a report associated. So MHEC will be, a representative will be providing information, recommendations that will go into a report that is submitted to the Maryland General Assembly. So the overall key takeaways and path forward with these 15 new reporting requirements with the 4 restricting fundings is that this 2026 legislative session most definitely marked a major shift in MHEC's reporting environment. The increase in both the reporting volume and the reporting complexity reflects a growing expectation around transparency, operational accountability, and fiscal oversight from the Maryland General Assembly. So moving forward, our success with these reports does depend on our strong internal coordination, which we are building and have within our reporting requirements, that standardized reporting system and kind of the process and the backtracking from the due date to set internal deadlines to make sure we are achieving submission by the required due date. Our proactive planning, for example, how I mentioned the Office of Student Financial Aid is already, drafting and completing their initial drafts to then get through the process of approval to then be formally submitted, and then the continued collaboration across divisions, and not just within our agency, but across several different agencies. So our goal here is not just compliance, but it is building the sustainable systems that are supporting our accurate reporting, our institutional trust, and our long-term operational readiness. So after we get through this interim and go into next legislative session, we are already prepared for any reports that may be added on top of us again. And with that, I conclude our legislative updates on our reporting requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Music, for that comprehensive description of your plan. Sounds like you all have your work cut out for you, but you have a good plan. And as Vice Chair Agu suggested at our last meeting, it would be great if this could be a standard reporting item on the monthly agenda. so we can see how you're doing progress to goal. But thank you for laying this out. I think it's very clear. Any questions from my fellow commissioners? All right. Thanks, Ms. Music. I believe the last thing on our agenda before we adjourn is public comment, and we did not receive any requests for public participation for today's meeting. There is one final item I would like to share. We have several commission members whose last meeting will be next month in June before their 5-year term expires, and then we'll be meeting new commissioners in July. But I learned just before this meeting started that one of our commissioners whose term is ending next month will not be able to join next month's meeting. And even though he asked me not to say anything, I'm not going to abide by his wishes. And I wanted to thank Commissioner Craig Williams for all of his help over the last several years and all of his excellent work as a commissioner. He was one of the few commissioners who was here when many of us started in July of 2023. And his really astute questions and steady guidance behind the scenes, his vast knowledge of state government from his time in the governor's office have been really helpful. So Commissioner Williams, I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all of us. We had something a little more formal planned for next time. So this is just a sort of last minute thing, but we will be sending you something in the mail from the commission to your home address, and just wanted to thank you for your hard work.
Well, thank you for the comments, even though I asked you not to say anything.
You did ask me not to when you sent me that text at 9:55, but I wasn't going to listen to that.
Well, 5 years goes fast, so each of you will be through that process quickly. And I appreciate working with each of you. It's been quite a pleasure and an honor to be a part of it. I was thinking back that I started working with leaders of MHEC in 2002 in the first gubernatorial transition. So I counted that 8 leaders who've been either the secretary or the interim secretary over the court since 2002. I've had the honor of working with, including our current interim secretary. So it's been quite an evolution. There's a lot of responsibility on the agency, as we just heard about. And there's always been a little bit of like, what is the real role and identity around MHEC, which is always an evolutionary conversation. So it's been a pleasure to be part of it. Thank you for your leadership, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Agu, and my fellow commissioners, and of course the staff at MHEC. So I'm sorry I won't be with you in June. I'll be traveling and unable to participate. So this is it, and it's my pleasure to be with you. So thank you so much.
And thank you for your service. Well, hearing no further business, I will, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Interim Secretary Kyros Lavanos, did you want to say something?
I did just also want to extend my gratitude to Commissioner Williams, and perhaps a bit of an informal request to continue working with you and seek your guidance. I think, as was evident throughout the meeting, your questions, and as Chair Motz alluded to, are so incredibly helpful. And you're right, there has been quite an evolution of the agency, and we're undergoing that as we speak. So thank you again, and I hope that we can continue to rely on your guidance, because it has been most helpful. And congratulations also on your son's graduation last week. So we'll miss you in June, and excited what's ahead for you.
Thank you for your service, sir. Hearing no other further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion is unanimous. This meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you all for your time today, and thank you, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.